Hey y'all, it's me, CheesyPaninie. I'm back and ready to roll. Before I start, I actually want to apologize for my voice because I have a cold. So if it sounds kind of weird, that's the reason why. Since it's my first time back after a month-long hiatus, I thought I could take on a challenge to get the ball rolling again. And truth be told, since my posts for Cheftember and Swordtember were pretty popular, I wanted to participate in the October art challenges, specifically Drawtober. I even had a sketch for the first prompt ready. Unfortunately, we had to move back to our house, and the rest of October was spent unpacking, setting things up, and so on. So I decided to just take on a different art challenge for this month, and the challenge I'm taking is Huevember. It's a challenge where you're supposed to make a piece of art every day for the whole month of November using a specific hue or color. Now, obviously, that's not really practical for me, so I'll be modifying it a bit to fit Terraria. Instead of 30 days with 30 different artworks, I'll be doing 4 builds in a span of 4 weeks. I'll be using the colors of Solar, Vortex, Nebula, and Stardust for this challenge. And as an added challenge, I decided to go to artprompts.org and generated random prompts for each theme. So for the first build, I'll be taking on the colors of solar items, which are reds, oranges, yellows, brown, and some white, gray, black, and shadow to balance it out. As for the prompt, I was given the task of creating a floating city in the clouds. Now usually for large builds like these, I would do a bit of planning, sketching here and there, but I was in this particular mood where I just wanted to build something and I didn't really think about it too much. I just knew that there were specific design details that I wanted to implement in the build and I just went with it. So the first design detail I got inspired by were these roof designs of Wat Rong Khun, the White Temple and the Golden Toilet of Thailand. These details look like something out of a legend and they make the building look as if they were made of flames. Now I'm not gonna try and recreate a temple or make a temple, I just wanted to take that idea of fiery looking details for some parts of the architecture of my city, specifically for my city hall. Admittedly, this was kind of a tricky thing to do since Terraria doesn't have any blocks that have that specific look, so I had to make do with what I had, and I decided to go with stone with lava moss, which I painted with deep yellow paint. Since moss grows very slowly, I had to amp up the time speed to max and waited for it to grow. And what's frustrating is sometimes there are certain parts that just won't grow no matter how long you leave it, so I had to open up T-Edit to place some mosses manually. I went through a couple of versions of the roof and entrance until eventually I ended up with a design that evolved into something way different from my reference. As for the rest of the building, I wanted to use yellow painted orange stained glass to get that gradient effect that I also used in my previous video, Unique Uses for Toilets. And while making the building all yellow like my reference would have been fine, I wanted to change up the details and add a variety of color to the mix by adding some boreal wood, shade wood, pumpkin, dynasty walls, and so on. But before I finish the city hall, let's actually plan out what the rest of the city is going to look like. So the idea was that there would be a dock for airships at the left side of City Hall, while the right side would be where the rest of the buildings are. For the city, I took some inspiration from buildings in Greece, where the buildings look very similar to each other and are kind of layered upwards. And as you can see, I seem to be placing a whole lot of buildings and those aren't really going to be built. Khaios actually dropped by to see me at work and helped me hammer down the platforms for the dock, which is also not gonna happen. Sorry, Groot. I still appreciate the help though. Anyways, after I've done the rough draft of the city, I completed the look of the city hall. And my favorite details of this build, aside from the moss, which I have to regrow again later, would be the terrace, which had pumpkins for curtains and honey platforms and torches for the railings, the glass windows, which are made with actuated and hammered glass over stained glass, surrounded by actuated meteorite bricks, and the door at the middle, which was simply shade wood with smooth sandstone blocks and walls, with this detail at the center, which are just hammered sunplate blocks and solar platforms. And that was my progress for the first 2 days. I took a break the next day and started working on it the day after. I started it off by working on the building at the very top of the city, which is supposed to be where the mayor lives. I wanted it to be a little fancy, signifying the importance of the person living there, but not so fancy as to give the impression that the mayor is a rich snob and not down to earth. As much as possible, I wanted it to look very welcoming to guests, so I made the top part really fancy with a stained glass dome, which was inspired by real-life domes, and made the lower part a little simpler with white dynasty walls and boreal wood details. And as you can see, I made sure to use mostly the same items as the ones in City Hall to make the build seem related or in the same theme with it. And to give the build a more homey feel, I decided to add some potted lava plants and water leaf planter boxes. And though the flowers that grew weren't in line with the color scheme, I decided to let it be because it kind of gave the build a little bit of extra flavor and livened it up. After the build was done, I proceeded to make the small buildings and staircase leading to the mayor's house. I made sure that the buildings had dynasty and boreal walls as part of the design to make it consistent, but changed it up a bit for each one just to keep them interesting. As for the stairs, I used crimstone brick walls and echo blocks to make it look like people are actually walking on it. For the 4th day, I stared at this space underneath the mayor's house and thought that putting a tunnel with a bridge underneath would make for an interesting design. I don't know if that's possible or practical in real life, but it looks interesting, so we're doing it. One detail that you might want to try when you build something in a perspective like this is to put some platforms over walls so you can stand on it. Palm wood platforms blend very well with most brick walls because they're segmented. And of course, we can't have the space underneath the bridge empty, so I put some water. However, the blue water just doesn't blend well with the rest of the city, so I browsed through the water fountains and found that the crimson one works best for it. I also paired this with yellow painted amber gemspark for a really nice glow. It almost looks like honey, but the difference between using honey and water is if you use water, you can put something underneath like walls to give it more depth, unlike honey, which will be too thick to see anything underneath. I also changed this tunnel's walls into green brick walls with some bits of lead, crimstone, and green bricks for extra detail. Some of them were hammered, actuated, and both. Day 5. I was honestly a little bit lost with where to go with this build. It was looking pretty good, and I was at that zone where I was afraid of messing it up and had a little bit of creative block. But I just kept building and experimenting and decided to focus on refining the shape of the city and added some railings around it because I thought it's probably a good idea to have some safety measures in place for the citizens of Terraria. It was actually here that I realized that the dock should probably be placed below instead. Sorry for making you hammer all those platforms, Khaios. I love ya. Of course, what's a dock without a ship? Since this is basically a made-up city with a made-up world and all that stuff, I decided to just go ham on the design of the ship. I didn't sketch it or anything, I just randomly made the shape of the airship and thought, you know what, this looks like a hummingbird, and I made it so. So after that, I rested for 3 days. I don't actually remember what I did during those 3 days, but it's always good to take a break every now and then to replenish the creative juices and whatnot. On the 6th day of building, I spent some time figuring out how the buildings on the lower part of the city were supposed to look. I wasn't initially planning to make it 3D, but I realized that the perspective of the build would probably make more sense that way, since I already have a couple of parts of the build in 3D. After I was happy with the perspectives, I began to decorate them. Now, before we continue, I would like to apologize because I accidentally deleted the last 5 recordings of my build. The good news is, I have screenshots of my progress and I can still show you guys how I went about it. It's actually good practice to take screenshots of your build every few minutes, especially large builds like this, because you can use it to track your progress. It can act as a backup of sorts in case you need to redo something, and it's easier to figure out which parts need to be fixed when you can see the whole thing. So once I took my screenshots, I realized that the buildings here and here looked kind of weird. They just didn't look right to me, so I decided to change the perspective like so. I also decided to simplify things and combine the 2 buildings at the center. And since I was taking up so much time on this one build already, I decided to cheat a little and use T-Edit to copy and paste one side to the other and just changed up the design of the buildings. At some point, I realized there was just so much space around and it felt too empty, so I decided to add stairs, put some brick walls underneath the railings and underneath the buildings, and make this part look like it was an elevated ground. And since I was using the same walls in the base of the buildings and the walls at the back, I needed to find a way to make the back walls appear darker, and the only paint I could really use for that is black, and I didn't really like it. So I did the next best thing and used platforms painted black, so when you look at it from afar, it gives that illusion of it being a little darker than the walls on the base of the buildings. And to finish things off on the 7th and final day, I placed a couple of plants in flower beds between the buildings and improved the shape of the curve of the city. And there you have it, Terraria City. They say that when you fly too close to the sun, you'll melt and die. Because of this, the people of this world have been afraid to fly. But one such man dared to dream. His name was Nikolai. He worked day and night to create his airship, the Hummingbird. It took him almost a decade to create a properly working airship, and everyone he knew shook their head and saw him as a delusional dreamer. But he wanted to know what was out there, above the clouds, and so he flew and disappeared. Everyone thought he was dead, but the truth was, he discovered a city high up on the sky above the clouds. It was a city glistening with gold, with plants that were warm to the touch. The citizens of the city were in awe of his arrival, and he was warmly welcomed by the mayor himself. It turns out that they were survivors of a war that occurred hundreds of years ago, and they started a new life up in the sky. But all of their ships had been destroyed, and no one knew how to repair or make them. So for years, none of them could go back down to their planet. With Nikolai's help, he created ships for the people and returned back home. And since then, people on the planet and those of the sky began to trade and shared their unique resources. Because of Nikolai's efforts, no longer was anyone afraid to fly. guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. I've been looking forward to sharing this build with you. I worked really hard on it and I'm really proud of it. So like I said in the beginning of the video, I've been away for a month and it took us several days of cleaning and organizing just to get all of our stuff sorted out since we left the house empty for several months. But anyways, I am so ready to get back to the groove of things, get back to making videos. One thing's for sure, I am so happy to finally have my own room again. I can finally work continuously when I need to and I don't need to share a space anymore. You have no idea how difficult it was to record my scripts. I had to do them either very early in the morning or really late at night. But now I can just do them whenever I need to. In other news, I've been trying to rebrand my channel, but I haven't had the time to fully convert it yet, so I'll be doing it gradually until I get all of it done, so you will probably see some small changes here and there in the next few videos. Aside from this, I've started posting on Instagram, so if you haven't followed me there yet, go and do it. I'll be posting some old and new builds there, and I'll even post sneak peeks of new videos. I've also updated my Patreon page to include tiers with rewards like access to my Patreon feed, map downloads, and wallpapers. Please consider checking out my Patreon page to learn more. And before this video ends, I would like to thank my patrons for the month: Sean Duski, Kyle, Roderick, Scarfy, and Khaios. Thank you so much for your continued support. I am eternally grateful for you guys, and because of you, I feel very encouraged to keep going with YouTube. Anyways, for now, I'm just gonna go do my thing, and you guys do your thing, and I'll see you guys later. Take it easy, stay cheesy.